Today we're going to do an introduction to cadences. So to do that, we have to understand a little bit about how music is built. First of all, composers have notes, but the notes don't mean anything by themselves. There are only 12 of them, and I put a note up there, and every other composer in the world has written that note before. But I can put a small number of notes together to get a musical idea, and we call that musical idea a motive, or sometimes we call it a motif, M-O-T-I-F or M-O-T-I-V-E, a motive. And that's like a brick in a building. It's a building block of music. And when composers use these motives, they will actually repeat them in variations sometimes, but like you would a brick pattern in a house. So you'd have motive one and motive two, then motive one again, motive two, and you build melodies out of this. Now, as you build melodies, you actually first build what's called a phrase. It's kind of like a sentence in English that becomes a paragraph, or like a place up to a comma that eventually becomes a sentence. It's a musical idea, but it's not, it stops. There's a breath after it, but it usually is part of a larger musical idea. And so we have a phrase, and then we put those phrases together, and we get a melody or a theme or a musical idea of some sort that might be a combination of phrases. So what's a phrase? A phrase is this idea of music that goes until it reaches a stopping point. And a stopping point is what we call a cadence. Now, sometimes a stopping point is just built on rhythm. So if you're going boom, you come to a long note at the end of fast notes, that will feel like an ending. And if you have rest, that will feel like an ending. So composers use rhythm to create the idea of a phrase. But in what we call tonal music, the music from Bach and through our pop music today, not all the music is tonal, but much of it is, it's usually the chords that determine the end of a phrase. And those chords, how they combine at the end of a phrase, is something we call a cadence. So a cadence is a set of chords, harmonic cadence, that brings a phrase to an end. So if you have a chord and it naturally leads to another chord and that chord feels like a good ending, then that brings the phrase to an end. We can catch a breath, and then we go on until we have the next chord that leads to another chord that brings you to an ending. So let's see if we can figure out what we're talking about here. So let's say I'm playing a piece, I start on a one chord. Well, one chord can stop a piece. It's the tonic chord. It's the piece we rest on. So we start there, we go through a bunch of other chords, and then eventually we come to the dominant chord, the 5 chord, and that chord just wants to go back to the tonic. I'll explain why it wants to go back to the tonic, but just take my word for it. It wants to go back to the tonic. And so when it does, and we hit the tonic chord, which is a rest chord, doesn't have to go anywhere, that's a cadence. And we even call that one, has a specific name. That's called an authentic cadence. Well, I'll go over all the other cadences in another video. I just want to introduce to you this idea that a musical idea comes to a stopping place. That's a cadence, a breath. Rhythm can create cadences, but in functional tonal music, most of the music we listen to, so music where chords function and the music is built on a key. That's what tonal means, it's a key. There, it's usually the chord progression that brings us to the cadence. Some chords want to go to others. Some chords want to be places of rest. We're going to meet all the cadences in the next video, but for right now, let's just understand what a cadence is and take that in and enjoy it. Cadences, half of the subject of our next chapter.